Hey, my name is Craig Bauer. I am a mixing engineer. I'm in my beautiful Northward control room here in Denver, Colorado. And today we are taking a look at the BX Glue plugin. The last time I was in front of these cameras for a Plugin Alliance, we did a tutorial of the AMEC mastering compressor. This time it's BX Glue. BX Glue is a VCA-based compressor with some very unique features. It's a 2-band compressor. And in addition to that, we have some tone controls for saturation, the typical parallel mix knob, level control, sidechain stuff, and what's really unique is a function called emphasis, which we will get to. I'm working on a song by the name of Sad Spring from an artist named Seefy, and it's a track that was produced by Anthony Resta, who's a brilliant producer. So before we get going here, let's just take a listen to a part of this song with the plugin fully engaged with the way I have it on the 2-mix, and we will go from there.
I've been round the globe, girl. We'll never be alone, girl. My heart is a home, girl. A space for yourself, right? This'll be the night. The start of something right. The stars will all align. This'll be our night, this'll be the night. The start of something right, the stars will all align. This'll be our night, this'll be our night.
So I have it on the 2-bus right now, and it's in the middle of 2 EQs with a limiter behind it. When I use a compressor on the 2-bus, I'm actually, personally, a fan of doing a fairly minimal amount of compression so it's not overdone on the 2-mix. In this particular setting, I have the ratio at 2:1. I have the threshold set at a fairly conservative level. Attack is pretty slow, and the release is fairly medium, more on the fast side. Let's listen to that same section one more time with the plugin coming in and out.
I've been round the globe, girl. We'll never be alone, girl. My heart is a home, girl. A space for yourself, right? This'll be the night, the start of something right. The stars will all align. This'll be our night, this'll be the night. The start of something right. The stars will all align. This'll be our night, this'll be our night.
There we go. Even with conservative settings here, what this plugin is doing to the 2-mix is really, really great. You can hear the vocal come way forward, just the fullness of the entire track. And again, this is with pretty minimal and conservative settings here. When I put it on a 2-bus, I like to keep the ratio pretty low, 2:1. I know 4:1 is probably more standard when it comes to 2-mix stuff. I like a reasonably slow attack so that the transients all get through, and a fairly medium release time. If you turn on the auto release, let's do that real quick and listen to it. It's a much smoother sound. Changing the release time will get you, you can get to the same place.
I've been round the globe, girl. We'll never be alone, girl. My heart is a home, girl. A space for yourself, right?
So we can take the 2 bands, they're split between high and low, and change where that crossover point is quite easily. And we can also change how tightly these 2 bands are linked together. On the stereo bus, somewhere in the middle is probably best. If you turn it all the way down to 0, you can get sort of a disconnect between the low and the high, which doesn't sound great. Turning it all the way off sort of eliminates the desire of having a 2-band compressor here. In the middle works great, and I can get enough pump and enough aggression between the 2 bands that makes this sound great and differentiates it from other mix bus compressors. So let's go back one more time. I'm going to start playing with some of these parameters here just to see how the compressor reacts to a higher ratio, changing the threshold, making the attack time a little bit faster, and changing the release time.
I've been round the globe, girl. We'll never be alone, girl. My heart is a home, girl. A space for yourself, right? This'll be the night, the start of something right. all align. This'll be our night. This'll be the night. The start of something right. The stars will all align. This'll be our night. This'll be our night.
So getting back to where we were initially, one of my favorite features of having a two-band compressor is this tilt function here, and it's basically balancing the low band against the high band, so it sort of acts like an EQ. So let's play it one more time and just start adjusting this and see what that does.
I've been round the globe, girl. We'll never be alone, girl. My heart is a home, girl. A space for yourself, right? This'll be the night. The start of something right. The stars will all align. This'll be our night. This'll be the night. The start of something right.
What a great control that is, having this balance between the high end and the low end based on where this crossover point is. Another interesting thing that you can do here is you can actually solo around the crossover point by clicking on this headphone control here. And it's basically a listen function that is an area around the crossover point. It's not just the low, it's not just the high, but it helps you determine where the correct crossover point be. And so we can demonstrate that real quick.
I've been round the globe, girl. We'll never be alone, girl. My heart is a home, girl. A space for yourself, right?
And if you're wondering how you determine where the correct crossover point would be on the 2-mix or on the mix bus, the best answer I have for you is experimentation. Where it's going to be on a hip-hop track might be wildly different from where it would be on a pop track, and it's the instrumentation and the production that's going to help you determine where to best place that crossover point. Another fascinating part of this plugin is the addition of adding a saturation parameter here, or total harmonic distortion. It gives you the option of 2 different VCAs and a couple different modes between those VCAs, or turning it off altogether. So again, let's play it back and let's listen to these various modes of the VCAs here.
I've been round the globe, girl. We'll never be alone, girl. My heart is a home, girl. A space for yourself, right? This'll be the night. The start of something right. The stars will all align. This'll be our night. This'll be the night. The start of something right. The stars will all align. This'll be our night.
And let's check out the dirty mode. With the dirty mode, it's basically taking the VCA and pushing it up against the ceiling a little harder, so it's making the sound of the compressor a little bit grittier.
I've been round the globe, girl. We'll never be alone, girl. My heart is a home, girl. A space for yourself, right? This'll be the night. The start of something right. The stars will all align. This'll be our night. This'll be the night. The start of something right. The stars will all align. This'll be our night. This'll be our night.
That sounds absolutely killer. And depending what you're using it on, it's going to be very different if you're using it on an individual track or if you're using it on the mix bus. It obviously gets more aggressive in dirty mode as opposed to the classic mode. And when you eliminate it altogether, suddenly the track sounds a little bit thin, might be a good word. Obviously, totally depends on the production that you're going after. What's really amazing about this plugin is this section called Emphasis. And it's really interesting what this does. Basically, it's a tilt function where you can have the compressor listen to a particular band, EQ-wise, in either tilt mode or in tub mode, which basically changes the shape of this control here and the frequency here. And it handles this in 2 different ways. There's pre-emphasis and de-emphasis, and it basically puts this EQ in front of the protection circuit and adjusts for it inversely behind the compressor circuit. Let's say we have a track, we have it on the mix bus, and we have a track that has a huge 808 in the track that's really big. If you've used compressors on the 2-mix for a track that has a big bottom end or an 808 or something that's heavy on the bottom end, you probably know that as you turn up the ratio and as the compressor works harder, the compressor acts too much and you can actually get some distortion. So what this is really doing is as you turn up the bottom end here, it's going to look at that bottom end and it's going to prevent the compressor from listening to that bottom end before it goes into the compression circuit, and then it makes up for that low end on the other side. So it's basically a safety net for preventing artifacts while you're compressing your 2-mix or any source, or preventing harshness based on what's being fed into it. And again, it makes up for that level on the way out. It's an amazing control to handle issues with your mix, especially on the 2-bus, where you have control of what's being fed into the compressor and how it reacts on the other side. Another thing that you can use this emphasis control for is use it in a creative fashion as opposed to just fixing problems. Let's play the track and just listen to what it's doing by playing with this emphasis here.
I've been round the globe, girl. We'll never be alone, girl. My heart is a home, girl. A space for yourself, right? This'll be the night. The start of something right. The stars will all align.
You can also change the center point frequency-wise of where this point is based on the tilt. Create that center point between the lowest frequency and the highest frequency. In the tilt mode, it's going to teeter on that. And it's also the point where the shape of the tub is created as well. It has negative values and positive values to look at that based on this point. So here we go again, listening to this in and out.
I've been round the globe, girl. We'll never be alone, girl. My heart is a home, girl. A space for yourself, right? This'll be the night. The start of something right. The stars will all align. This'll be our night. This'll be the night. The start of something right. The stars will all align. This'll be our night.
So based on adjusting those parameters, you can see how powerful this emphasis control is across the board. It fixes problems in the mix. You can get through a mix, get to the end of a mix, and realize that there's just too much low end, not enough high end, and with one control, sort of rebalance the top to the bottom, much like you can with what's happening on this tilt control here. So the amount of control you have across the board between the high end and the low end and the shape of what's happening in the compression is unprecedented. I've never seen anything like it. And in fact, there's more than one way to kind of get to the same place between what's happening in the compression on the tilt side here, what's happening with the side chain, and what's happening with the emphasis. Unprecedented. This thing is going to live on my mix bus. I would also tell you that it's ideal to have this compressor engaged from the very beginning with nothing happening on the emphasis, with nothing happening on the side chain, finding a middle point in the crossover between the two and a middle point of the linking of the bands and starting from that point. And you're wondering, well, how do I know what to change and when to change it? The reality is that I start a mix by creating a rough mix of just pushing up the tracks and getting a really good blend of what's happening. And then you can sort of determine what an average point of compression would be, where to set a threshold, how hard of a ratio you want to put in, what the attack and release times would be, and just start from a medium point. And as you're building the mix, make small adjustments to the compressor as you go. That way, by the time you get to the mix, you're not completely changing all these parameters from beginning to end, and it'll get you a great result. Okay, so let's move on and take a listen to BX Glue on a single track. This is a sort of weird synth, sweepy drum loop that's happening in the bridge of the song, and I'm going to solo it first just so you can know what we're listening for in this bridge. All right, so let's put the vocal back in, get this out of solo mode, and listen for that sound as we go through the bridge.
You are the magic makes me whole. Sophia.
So that is the sound. Once again, now I'm going to solo it and bypass the plugin so we can see how much it's actually doing. One of the things that is important when putting compression on a track is having a goal in mind. Making sure that what we're trying to do is being accomplished with a compressor as opposed to just sticking a compressor on things without having really any thought and any real goal in mind. That is what I love about BX Glue on this particular track that we're going to play again. It takes this part that would otherwise be not important at all, brings it up to the point where when you're listening to this bridge, suddenly it comes in and without taking away from the vocal, pushes it forward enough where we know this is an integral part of the groove. Once again, I'm going to put the vocal back in. I'm going to bypass the plugin, and we're going to see how there's no real lift when we get to the second half of this bridge because the plugin is not pushing it forward at all. It's not there to push forward if we bypass it. Here's one more time with it bypassed.
This'll be, you are the matches that light my soul. You are the magic that makes me whole.
And of course, there's a volume difference between the plugin and being out, but it's more than that. The plugin is just grabbing it, pushing it forward, and based on the parameters I have going on, especially with the emphasis here, it's just creating a sound that makes it very important in the track without it taking over the vocal. So once again, with it in, with the vocals in, from the beginning of the bridge, and you will feel it, you will hear it, and it's all happening because of this compression and this emphasis control within the compression.
This'll be, you are the matches that light my soul. You are the magic that makes me whole. Sophia.
There's no not understanding what is happening with this particular track when we get halfway through the bridge. It's doing it in a way where other compressors were not making the same deal out of it. I didn't get this compressor till I was 3/4 away through this mix. It was just released in the middle of it. And when I swapped it out with this, it completely changed the vibe of the bridge. I have the crossover point very low. It's not working incredibly hard based on where the threshold is, but I am pushing the ratio pretty intensely so that it's squashing it enough to allow it to be very important in the mix. I do have the dirty VCA set, a fair amount of the level of that in there. Once again, let's just hear it.
This'll be, you are the matches that light my soul. You are the magic that makes me whole. Sophia.
BX Glue, changing the entire feel of this bridge in a way that nothing else did. If you haven't already tried it, you need to go to pluginalliance.com right now, download the demo, or do yourself a favor, just get it. It's that simple.